This is a story my dad told me once, and I will never forget it. It happened when he was young, back when my grandfather was still alive. It was late one evening, close to Christmas. The air was cold and the sun was setting as my dad and grandfather walked to an old cemetery. They were visiting my great-grandfather's grave to check on it, clear away leaves, and make sure everything was tidy. The cemetery was old, with crooked headstones and moss covering many of the names. As they walked through the iron gates, my dad said he felt uneasy, like something was watching them. He had told himself it was just the cold and the shadows playing tricks on him. When they reached my great-grandfather's grave, they began cleaning it up. My grandfather was brushing dirt off the headstone when they heard a strange sound. "What's that?" my dad asked. My grandfather paused and listened. The sound grew louder, a deep, heavy snoring, like someone fast asleep. "Who could be sleeping here?" my grandfather whispered, glancing around the cemetery, but there was no one in sight. The sound didn't stop. It echoed through the graveyard, growing louder and clearer as they listened. My dad's skin crawled when he realized the sound wasn't coming from the trees or the paths. It was coming from beneath the ground. My dad pointed to an old sunken grave nearby. The snoring grew louder, unmistakably coming from that spot. They wanted to leave immediately, but before they could move, the sound stopped. The graveyard fell silent. Without a word, they hurried out of the cemetery. The next morning, my grandfather went to a priest and told him what had happened. The priest listened carefully and explained that the man in that grave had been murdered. His death was violent and unjust, and his soul had moved on. The priest told them that the snoring could be heard every single night. The man's soul didn't want to rest. I think this story is terrifying, especially knowing it's real. There is nothing scarier than visiting a loved one's grave and encountering something so eerie and unexplained. Hello Daisy. Last year in December, I went to Mexico with my family. One night, my cousin and I were outside with our friends. We were just sitting down when all of a sudden, we heard a horse running towards us. It was dark outside, so my cousin pulled out her phone to shine a light. We didn't see anything, but we all heard the sound of the horse coming closer. A day or two later, we found out that 2 people from the area had passed away on the same night we heard the horse. At the time, we didn't connect the 2 events, but a few nights later, we were outside again when we heard the hens starting to sing. My grandma told me that when hens do that, it means death is coming to collect the souls of those who have passed. That's when I got up and told my cousin we should go back inside. My cousin and I went to our room, and shortly after, we heard someone banging on the back gates. We didn't investigate. We just got into bed and laid there in silence. Later that night, when we were all in a deep sleep, I suddenly woke up to the sound of a cat. I couldn't see it because I was facing the wall, but I could hear its footsteps. It sounded heavy, and the cat wasn't just meowing. No, it was crying, almost like a person. I got chills, and the room felt cold. I didn't dare to turn around. I stayed facing the wall, eventually falling back asleep. When I woke up the next morning, everything felt normal again, like nothing had happened. Hi Daisy, my name is Orlando. I wanted to share a story about my mom's experience back in 2002. That year, during winter break, my mom, her brother, and her dad went to El Capuli, Michoacan, Mexico. It was cold back home in the United States, but when they arrived in Mexico, the weather was unexpectedly hot. They stayed at my great-grandma's house. My mom hadn't been to Mexico in years, so everything felt new to her. She spent time exploring the town with her brother, and the 2 weeks flew by. Before they knew it, it was time to head back to the States. But the night before they left, something terrifying happened. My mom and her cousin experienced paranormal activity in the house. That night, as they were laying in bed, where they had been staying for the past 2 weeks, something felt different. My mom remembers seeing a presence, but couldn't explain it. She distinctly recalls the moment it entered the room. A cold breeze drifted past them, and the curtains swayed without explanation. At first, they tried to ignore it, convincing themselves it was nothing. But things quickly took a turn. Plates suddenly began crashing to the floor, shattering one after another. Loud noises echoed through the house. Then, to make matters worse, my mom says they heard the headless horseman galloping outside. The sound of hooves grew louder, and it felt like the force was kicking the door. My mom's aunt, a devout Catholic, had a rosary with her. She immediately began praying out loud, but as she prayed, the noises only grew louder. Footsteps stomped on the upper floor, and it felt like the entire house was alive with chaos. After what felt like an eternity, 3 long hours, my grandpa and uncle arrived to take them home. When they opened the door, they found my mom and her cousin crying. They didn't understand why until they heard the full story. What made it even more unsettling was that no one else in the house experienced anything. 4 other people lived there, including my mom's cousins, but none of them heard the breaking dishes, the loud noises, or the stomping upstairs. It seemed like only the visitors from Washington, those from outside the country, experienced the activity. The next morning, they woke up and found no evidence of what had happened. No dishes were broken and nothing was out of place. It was as if it had never happened. To this day, my mom doesn't know what the paranormal activity meant, but she took it as a sign to never go back. LOL. And she hasn't. Hi Daisy. This event deeply impacted my family on Christmas Eve in 1997. One year, while my parents and I were visiting my Nana and Tata in Yuma, Arizona for Christmas, we received a phone call just before midnight. My grandmother answered, gasped, and began weeping. It was one of her sisters calling to tell us that my great-grandfather had passed away. The incident was tragic. Some family members who had been visiting Arizona before Christmas decided to return home to San Diego, California on Christmas Eve. During their trip back, they stopped at a gas station so everyone could use the restroom. The men's restroom was occupied, and my great-grandfather, desperate to go, decided to walk to the side of the gas station, where it was darker and bushy. What he didn't realize was that there was a steep drop-off just beyond the bushes. He lost his footing and fell. His death was declared instant. The following year was difficult, but we gathered as a family for Christmas Eve. It turned out to be surprisingly a good time, but inevitably we began talking about what had happened the year before. At some point, a line began to form outside my tia's restroom. Near the entrance to one of the rooms was a framed picture of my great-grandfather. We told him to slow down with the drinking, but he didn't listen. He was so drunk when he left here. I'm sure that's what led to his death. One of my tias said. He would have been fine if the damn restroom wasn't being used at the gas station. Another added. It turned out my great-grandfather had been drinking throughout the day of Christmas Eve. By the time they left for San Diego, some family members were worried. While he wasn't driving, they feared he would be loud and obnoxious during the trip home. As we stood around his picture, some family members cried while others argued. Suddenly, the framed portrait of my great-grandfather fell and shattered. No one had touched it, and it had been hung high on the wall. To make things even stranger, a large black widow spider was found behind the frame. Silence filled the room until one of my tias quickly picked up the broken picture frame and warned everyone to watch for shattered glass. There was something eerie about the way the picture fell, but we all left the room and tried to lighten the mood afterward. I'm not saying my great-grandfather was a bad man. This event simply spooked us, and it's something that has stayed with me ever since. Hi Daisy. My mom is a firm believer in ghosts and enjoys paranormal and scary stories. But one thing she absolutely won't tolerate is the word Ouija board in our house. Why? Because when she was young, she and my uncles played with an Ouija board and had a very bad experience. Naturally, this made my sister and me very curious about playing with one. So one day, when we were home alone, we made an Ouija board out of cardboard. We didn't really think it would work, but we tried anyway. Nothing happened, so we destroyed it and went on with our day. Weeks later, the house felt calm and everything was going well, to the point that we completely forgot about the Ouija board. Until one night. My sister and I liked sleeping in the living room during Christmas time so we could watch TV and stay near the Christmas tree. I randomly woke up in the middle of the night. When I opened my eyes, I saw my mom standing there, staring at me while I slept. I felt a chill, but in a soft voice, I said, "Mami, gases. Mom, what are you doing?" She didn't respond. As I looked at her face, something felt off. She didn't look real, but I was more tired than scared, so I just went back to sleep. A few days later, my sister told me she had the same exact experience. My blood went cold. I told her what I had seen, and we both immediately realized the reason behind it. That's when small things started happening. Whispers, doors closing, and other strange noises. But everything slowly began to escalate. One day, my sister and I were playing a game where we'd hide from each other until the other person found and scared them. I decided to hide behind the kitchen pantry. My sister started calling out, "¿Dónde estás?" Then she suddenly said, "Ay, ya te vi. Oh, I see you." I was confused because in order to see me, she would have had walked into the kitchen. I stepped out of my hiding spot to find her standing near her bedroom, staring at the slightly open door. When she saw me walk out of the kitchen, she immediately stopped smiling. She told me she had clearly seen me going behind our bedroom door and had been waiting for me to come out. When I told her I had been hiding in the kitchen the entire time, we both froze. We checked the house, but as expected, we were the only ones there. That wasn't the first time something or someone had imitated me. It was just the beginning. So that was it for today's video. Thank you to everyone that shared their spooky Christmas stories with all of us. And now we're able to get spooked even on Christmas. And it's all thanks to you guys. Los quiero. I hope you guys have an amazing time during these holidays. Have fun. Stay safe. Los quiero. And I hope to see you guys all in my next one. Bye.